Welcome to Domain 3.6 in the Coordination, Linkage, and Monitoring section of this case management training. We're going to take a look at how you can develop self-advocacy skills in yourself as well as with the client to promote the client's individual choice and self-determination. When we advocate for the client, we're promoting the client's individual choice and their own self-determination. We want to advocate for the acquisition of services and resources necessary by the client to represent and defend the client through direct intervention. What that means is the client may or may not be able to get resources on their own, which is why they're asking for case management assistance. If services were easy to get, we probably wouldn't have to advocate. But sometimes services are not easy to get, or there are obstacles in the way, and the client is not experienced or well-versed in the systems to get around those barriers. So as case managers, we have that experience. We know how to get around those barriers, and so we advocate for the client. This might be directly, or it might be by coaching the client. So what we're doing is we're assisting the client to develop these self-advocacy skills. The definition of self-determination and self-determination skills is this. It's the process by which the person controls their own life. A person should participate in their service plan process. Imagine how exhausting and disheartening and deflating it must be to some of our clients. People always telling them, hey, you've got these faults and those faults. People talking about them and their disabilities, their shortcomings, their negative behaviors, and telling the person what they need to do. How often do we let the person participate in their own processes? It's important for the case manager to be comfortable, confident, and competent in framing their approach to advocacy by applying a client-based model. This model empowers the client and is based on the fundamental view that the client determines and communicates their own advocacy interest, and the case manager facilitates the client's ability to achieve them. In this model, the client is the source of control and is an active participant in designing the focus of advocacy and how to attain self-designed desires. This approach demonstrates respect for the client's autonomy, the client's independence, the client's right to choice, and the client's self-determination. The case manager engages clients and their support systems in their own behavioral health and healthcare management. The case manager must develop respect and trusting case manager-client relationships that respect the client's autonomy, independence, and right to self-determination. The case manager must support the client's culture, including their values, belief system, preferences, and interests. So we see that the role of the case manager is that of an advocate. Advocacy on behalf of the client can be provided on a spectrum of involvement because clients come with differing experiences and levels of ability to take care of themselves. Case managers and case management leaders recognize the importance of client advocacy as a priority role of the case management. Always consider, is the advocacy in the best interest of a client? Apply ethical principles at every step along the process. Does the client want the advocacy on their behalf? Do they understand it? And do they understand the outcome or benefit? Are the advocacy efforts empowering the client so that he or she can advocate on their own to the degree to which they choose and are capable of? And is the client offered opportunities to learn self-advocacy skills through observation, through case management modeling, through education and practice? If you'll take a look at this graph, it identifies the 9 stages and their related case management advocacy actions. You can assess where the client is on this graph when you first meet them. Perhaps they've had experiences before advocating for themselves or dealing with the system in their efforts to get services. Perhaps this is their first entry into the system. Case managers use advocacy in a strategic and intentional manner to bring their clients to a state of full engagement and control over their own health care. They may achieve this through a stepwise approach using these 9 steps or stages in the client's engagement. It's important to recognize that effective case managers are those who start their advocacy role from the first time that they encounter their client in the client support system. The case manager will present a vision of self-advocacy and self-determination with explanations of how this can promote the client's personal well-being, the client's social well-being with their family and their community, and give a voice to changes in government should the client choose that, including the right to vote. Let's take a look further at these stages. Each case manager-client relationship and care context is affected by the technical skills and the competencies of the case manager and the quality of the personal service demonstrated in the relationship. Both components then affect the client's experience of care, whether optimal or suboptimal. A fundamental driver in this model is the belief in a humanistic view of the client that the case manager shows in the context of a supportive interpersonal relationship with the client. A skilled, knowledgeable, and competent case manager is better able to ensure that each client receives the right services in the right quantity at the right time by the right provider and in the right level of care in accordance with the client's health situation and care setting. One of the ultimate goals of the case manager-client advocacy relationship is transitioning the client from a state of detachment to full engagement in their own health. The case manager achieves this by intentionally shifting the client's state of reluctance and apprehension to that of comfort and empowerment in assuming responsibility and accountability for their own health and health care. This transition is in the client's best interest and results in the clients experiencing better health outcomes and lower costs by avoiding unnecessary access to healthcare services and preventing the provision of suboptimal services. A client who feels empowered is more likely to be actively engaged in the management of their own health. The engaged client is then able to assume responsibility for self-care and self-management, make informed decisions about their own care options, and share their own personal opinions about services and resources. The first stage related to case management advocacy is raising awareness. Case managers share all essential information with clients about their behavioral health conditions and the case manager's perception of the client's states of engagement. Case managers remain tuned in to the client's ability to perceive what is shared and the feelings expressed about or the responses to situations, while the case manager remains a supportive and non-judgmental attitude. And throughout this awareness conversation, case managers remain supportive of the client and meet their duty of respecting the client's dignity and autonomy and respect the client's rights. The next stage is doing for. During the time of the case management and they're raising awareness of their clients to their behavioral health conditions, case managers continue to advocate by doing for the patient. This is important to prevent the clients from experiencing unsafe situations or suboptimal care. It's also reflective of case managers representing those who are unable to represent themselves. An example would be providing a client with information about NAMI and securing a schedule of meetings regardless of whether the client asked for it. Case managers may do for their clients while educating them about their conditions and needs and clarify situations for them and simplify what they may perceive as very complex or vague. Throughout this stage of doing for, The case managers maintain objectivity, refrain from disapproving undesirable behaviors their clients may demonstrate, and intervene on behalf of the clients as warranted. The third stage is counseling. Case managers refer clients for counseling as an act of advocacy. The case manager does not do the counseling. The referral for counseling will help the client get a better understanding of where they're at with acknowledging their own behavioral health conditions, what fears or anxieties they might be experiencing, and what type of support they might value best. At this stage, the case managers link their clients with professional guidance to assist them in resolving emotional problems and in addressing concerns or conflicts that may have arisen. That's counseling. A fourth stage is doing together. And at this point now, the client is beginning to learn how to understand what case management is and what self-advocacy is, so they're ready perhaps to do it together with the case manager. Here, the case managers assist clients in their attempt at taking care of their own behavioral health issues. For example, together the case manager and the client may practice taking the bus. The case manager may first demonstrate the behavior to the client and then ask the client to repeat it. During the practice, the case manager imparts specific knowledge to the client so that the client begins to develop a level of comfort with the behavior and the familiarity with the technical aspects of this kind of self-care. The client begins to move away from detachment and reluctance and move towards engagement and empowerment. Case managers use teach-back to examine the client's degree of understanding and comfort with self-management and to determine areas for improvement and other further emphasis. The fifth stage in developing self-advocacy skills is that in which the case manager supports the client by becoming the owners of the behavioral health goals and by demonstrating effective self-management. In this situation, the case manager coaches the client to support the clients in developing necessary skills and abilities to help them deal with issues and challenges before they become a major problem. Coaching as an act of advocacy may take place as a conversation. It may take place and be perceived by the client as a positive and rewarding approach to self-management. Also, coaching might actually come in the relationship between the therapist and the client, and the client might describe this to the case manager. Case managers monitor the client's use of guides, including therapists or others in the client support system, who are safeguarding safety while clients act as the doers. And then doing independently is where we're moving on to next. The case managers monitor their clients' participation in coaching and continued support to reach to a state of independence in performing self-care and self-management activities. In this phase, clients are engaged, they're empowered, and they're comfortable in doing for themselves. They're also able to seek out the case manager as needed. The clients behave as well-informed individuals and are aware of their behavioral health condition, the importance of their health decisions, that is self-determination, and their expectation for adhering to care regimen or the service plan. That's their autonomy. In the seventh stage, the clients start to take ownership. Here, the clients demonstrate rights and duty towards taking care of their own behavioral health and healthcare needs. They're responsible and they're accountable for making decisions. They're showing autonomy and independence. They're seeking information or support when they feel they need to, and they voice their opinions about their options, their needs, their preferences, their interests. They're acting with self-determination, and they're making their right to choice known. Case managers continue to assess, coordinate, monitor, link, and support their clients as they develop their skills and abilities for self-care and self-management, and they reward effective performance. Case managers also step back and they wait for their clients to ask for assistance rather than force their support on the clients. Despite this hands-off approach, to caring and advocating for clients, the case managers are continuing to ensure that their clients are safe, that they're receiving optimal care, and that their behavioral health outcomes are improving. Ultimately, case managers intervene when situations are questionable and to prevent suboptimal and unsafe care provisions. In the mastery stage, the clients demonstrate a grasp over their own health condition. They interact in a knowledgeable manner, they make well-informed decisions, and they voice what is in their best interest. They also assume full responsibility for shared decision-making and the advancement of the client-case manager relationship to a true partnership. Clients act in a confident manner, and they are free of self-doubt for the most part, actively pursue information instead of being passive recipients, and they demonstrate necessary skills and knowledge in self-management. Case managers in this phase begin the termination phase of the service and continue to support their clients and advocate for them by applying similar strategies as those in the ownership phase. In the maintenance phase, the case managers just monitor the ability of their clients to conserve the mastery they have already achieved over their behavioral health and health care. This is important for ensuring that clients continue to experience the safe health conditions and quality outcomes. In this stage, clients are feeling empowered and consistent in demonstrating full engagement in their health care needs. Consistent with the principles of recovery, the establishment of trusting, supportive relationships through persistence and consistency is considered by some to be the most fundamental requirement of recovery-oriented care. In the presence of such relationships, the illness no longer remains the primary focus of the person's life, and the person is then able to move on to other interests and activities. With this kind of encouraging support, people will be more likely to expand their horizons, take risks that they haven't taken before. And to maximize these benefits of the process, the case manager must be more than just a case coordinator. They must be also willing to fill in the gaps needed and assist the clients in developing their own individual visions and journeys of recovery through this process of defining meaning and purpose in their life. Let's look at what self-advocacy could actually do for the client. In order to effectively address individuals' human basic needs for decent housing, food, work, and connection with the community, providers must be willing to go where the action is. That is, they must get out of their offices and into the community. They must be prepared to go out and meet people on their own turf and on their own terms to offer assistance which they might consider immediately relevant to their lives. Staff cannot be content with making suggestions regarding steps their clients might need to take in their lives, like seeking employment, as the clients may then either disregard or be unable to follow such suggestions on their own, especially at the beginning of the client-case management relationship. Rather than waiting for their clients to show up at the office, it's incumbent upon staff to meet the client where they are in the community and to facilitate their participation in such activities, to the point of actually accompanying them if it's necessary. And then in those stages of self-advocacy, rather than becoming an enduring figure in the person's life, the case manager is more like a community guide. A community guide would play a transitional role in facilitating the person's engagement in social relationships with peers in the community. Guides are neither peers nor friends, but they're tools for the person to use in reconnecting to the things that matter to him or her. Case managers respect the boundaries of the case management role in the recovery model of the case management. There are some recommended practices for each of these layers of self-advocacy. Let's take a look. There are different layers to self-advocacy, including personal, self-advocacy, practicing self-care, and also community self-advocacy. And we want to explain to the client what these different levels are and how they look, and how the client could take control and take responsibility for their own self-advocacy. For example, in personal self-advocacy, we want the client to understand the difference between being assertive and being aggressive. We want to help the client understand that by being assertive and expressing their own needs in a way, it fosters respect. If they're too passive or they try hard to avoid conflict, they risk not getting their needs met or not being taken seriously. And when you don't take someone's needs and feelings into account, the client may come across as aggressive, trying to get what they want at any means possible. We want them to understand how to use words positively, how to have confident body language, and how to use I statements. For example, a good I statement is, "I worry about you and feel hurt when you arrive home late without calling. From now on, please tell me if you're running behind." Practicing self-care is also an advocacy step that clients can learn. Good self-care demonstrates that the client values themselves. They're taking their medications consistently. They are trying to eat nutritious meals and exercising. They want to know about their therapy and their medication options so that when they visit with the doctor or therapist, they're not afraid to offer their thoughts on the course of treatment, and they're not afraid to engage the provider in understanding personal values and preferences in the treatment. They're interested in what their diagnosis is, what the symptoms are, and how they can cope with their own personal experiences with that diagnosis. In community is about building up the client's support system or their team. They want to develop good relationships with family and find value in doing so. They want to develop friends in their larger community. So case managers can help strengthen that support system with the client. The adage that people around you influence your health and well-being is true, and by strengthening the whole system, the client and the support system rise together. It's important in the community aspect of self-advocacy to maintain a good work-life balance. Everyone deserves to expect fair wages, safe working conditions, and a balance between work life and personal life for positive mental health. Clients should be able to ask for accommodations at work and accomplish both career goals as well as the company's objectives for where they work. And they can understand how important it is to have supports in place. If they have children, they need to have supports in the school system. If they're working, they need to have their bills paid, and understanding the mental health system as well as a resource. They may also want to work with advocacy groups. By getting involved with organizations like NAMI, they will promote their own mental health awareness and reduce stigma. And creating personal connections with people who are empathetic reduces social isolation, which makes recovery easier. Voting is the easiest way for any person to advocate for their own needs at the government level, and to vote for candidates who take a person's concerns seriously and understand the importance of mental health. Clients may want to get involved at this level and to be able to inform their representatives and to write to and meet their representatives about legislation that impacts mental health care. If a person wants to contribute their thoughts in a town meeting, that can help shape their environment. Advocating for a client to develop this kind of self-advocacy is very important. The client may also want to support a local crisis intervention team and advocate for mandatory mental health first aid training. Mental illness can damage self-esteem, but when we self-advocate within every layer of our lives, we're able to repair some of that damage and empower ourselves. Self-determination is something that we should be working on and weaving into everything. Not only ourselves as case managers, and if we can do this, then we can teach our clients as well. The case manager and the client should have a vision that is the same vision. The client participated in developing this vision, and the vision becomes the goal so that both case managers and clients cannot be intimidated by adding goals because it's a joint venture. A client needs to be able to self-identify their triggers, predict them, and have an action plan of acceptable coping skills. There are challenges to honoring autonomy as the client develops their self-advocacy skills. First, although the client has a legal right to behave in a particular way, it may be difficult for you in your duties as a case manager to honor this right if you believe the individual is acting foolishly or irrationally. Second, in order to authentically exert autonomy, an individual must have the cognitive ability to understand, to reason about, and to appreciate the nature and likely consequences of his or her behavior. Suppose you're confronted by a client whose health behaviors are exceedingly poor. Despite your instructions and your exhortations, the client continues to eat an unhealthy diet or engages in all kinds of health risks that sabotage your efforts. How are you supposed to honor this individual's autonomy? Once you realize that your efforts are failing to help this client, you may call on a nutritionist or maybe a psychologist who can set up a behavioral health program. But if the client continues to staunchly reject these efforts, yet it appears that he understands the consequences of doing so, it is clear that the client's resistance is an authentic expression of autonomy. You have done what you can reasonably do in making referrals and are professionally obligated to do. And you are ethically justified in severing your professional relationship with the client because the client is simply not living up to his part of the case management agreement. Still, a discussion with your supervisor to make sure you've thought of everything is warranted here. The right of autonomy includes a right to make risky or hazardous decisions, as long as those decisions do not unreasonably imperil oneself or others, and the client understands and accepts the risks that they are assuming for their ill-advised choices and decisions. An important aspect of autonomy is that it's affected by the client's cognitive ability and its impact on the consequences of his or her behavior. Consider the case in which your client is poorly educated, cannot pay attention long enough to absorb instructions, cannot read above a second grade level, or suffers symptoms of early dementia. Or perhaps the client is severely depressed. His conversation is incoherent or on point, but decisions nevertheless reflect a profound gloom and disinterest in getting well and an intractable expectation that things will only get worse. You, as the case manager, have a duty to protect the client from himself and others. What should you do in these situations? How do you honor these clients' autonomy? Well, you might use your motivational interviewing skills to see if you can get to the real issues and concern your client is facing and address them. Continue to educate your client about his or her condition. Offer interventions and services that are available to ultimately arrive at an option your client agrees to pursue. Involve a member of the client support system in the discussion, with the client's consent, of course, and perhaps maybe a member of the client's choosing. Highlight potentially favorable outcomes of the suggested interventions and services, and discuss your client's situation with other members of the interdisciplinary healthcare team to create a plan together. Consider now another client whose situation has worsened. Suppose he becomes suicidal and communicates his suicidal ideations to you, and you have taken no supportive measures whatsoever. You might rightfully be accused of incompetence bordering on abandonment. You, the case manager, have a duty to protect the client from himself or others. Discussing these situations with your supervisor is your best line of defense because you and your supervisor will work as a team to find the best solutions for your client. It can nevertheless be difficult for you to know at what point in the case management process it is best to intervene, especially when the intervention might result in a restriction of the client's desires, their preferences, or liberties. And that's why you want to have ongoing supervision with your supervisor so that you can track these situations and the gains and the setbacks that any client has and develop a sense of knowing what the client is experiencing and how best to help. All would probably agree that a case manager who becomes aware that his or her client's driving skills have deteriorated to the point where it constitutes a hazard, they have a professional obligation to call this to someone's attention in authority, such as the client's physician. If none of the client's health professionals take reasonable steps to remedy this situation, and if the client does indeed harm someone while in a driving incident, those health professionals can certainly be blamed for their unresponsiveness, and they can be sued in some states for failure to protect third parties. Taking steps that culminate in the revocation of someone's driving privileges can be an extremely unpleasant undertaking and can also result in the professionals losing that individual as a client. Driving an automobile, living by oneself, raising children according to one's values, bearing arms, and engaging in intimate relationships are hallmark examples of a citizen's self-determination and their autonomous rights. When rights such as those are abbreviated or revoked, a person might react with deep feelings of anger or even vengefulness towards those who are trying to help them. When you are serving clients who are unable to exert autonomy, such as clients who lack judgment or capacity, you must ensure that you are coordinating your client's care with whomever is legally authorized to do so. Usually this person is a next of kin, a designated healthcare proxy, or a court-appointed guardian, often identified in state law as the one authorized to make medical and healthcare decisions on the client's behalf. Because the majority of case managers are trained in either nursing, social work, or vocational rehabilitation, they should be aware of the need to proceed only with case management plans of care for their clients that have already been approved by the client's lawfully designated surrogate or proxy. Whenever you are confronted with challenging situations in your case management role, you should seek the advice from a reliable source that informs on what is reasonable and prudent, as a case manager would do. Reasonable and prudent are the measures the law expects from any healthcare professional confronted with similar conditions. These are the measures courts use to assess professional case management behavior. A court rarely imposes its own notion of what counts as reasonable and prudent in a particular case. Instead, the courts will put the question to the case manager's peers or to court-appointed experts. Thus, if you recognize that your behavior is clearly unorthodox and would not be supported by your peers, you are probably skating on very thin ethical and professional ice. Reasonable and prudent behaviors are not only good criteria for meeting legal expectations, they usually meet ethical expectations as well. Professionals are not obligated to meet their clients' needs endlessly, but they are obligated to meet what case management ethical standards expects. This includes an adherence to the law. In matters relating to problematic client behaviors or decisions, you might be the one to first notice them, but perhaps not knowing what to do, unless you're appropriately trained in this regard. Therefore, seek out the guidance of your supervisor. Case managers should have access to procedures and resources for the care of clients whose behaviors seem significantly problematic and dangerous rather than just eccentric. These might be legal or social services resources, clinical programs, or consultants who can give professional advice and care. To the extent that clients are reasonably autonomous, they bear the responsibility for their own decisions. However, once the client's cognitive faculties fail them and they can no longer exercise autonomy because they cannot adequately understand or reason about or exert adequate insight or appreciate the consequences of their decisions, their healthcare professionals or their surrogates become responsible for them and what happens to them. Case managers need to be acutely aware of the impact clients' cognitive condition on autonomy and be able to take appropriate steps to protect both their clients and their own welfare. Nonmaleficence means refraining from harming others, as in a common phrase, above all, do no harm. To refrain from harming is, of course, the most basic expectation that any health consumer will have of his or her health provider, while health professionals are probably appalled by the very idea that a professional would intentionally harm a client. All case managers should be somewhat knowledgeable about many of the ethical standards. For example, a case manager who does not know anything about confidentiality and privacy requirements, criminal behavior, informed consent, or ordinary professional courtesy would be seriously lacking in essential information, and therefore would potentially act in ways that violate the code. A particularly trying situation that invites maleficent behavior is when you become exasperated or even come to dislike a particular client or support system. In a situation such as this, the possibility of harming a client becomes quite real. Your natural reaction is often to be rid of this person. Although understandable, this feeling can translate itself into any number of problematic behaviors on your part, such as ignoring the client or ignoring the client support system, lecturing, sermonizing, arguing, blaming, feeling a strong aversion to communicating at all with the client or their support system. These behaviors would hardly be conducive to a respectful, productive, or professional relationship between you and the client or the client support system, and ultimately good case management outcomes. It's easy to hear advice to remain emotionally calm and objective in situations of disempowering feelings such as anger and resentment, or behaviors such as ignoring and lecturing, or thoughts such as a desire not to interact with the client. However, that advice can prove extremely difficult to realize among clients who are controlling or overly critical and demanding, or angry, manipulative, provocative, ornery, impossible to please, or threatening. Because it often feels like these kinds of clients are on the attack, and they often are because they might be venting their anger and frustration at the case manager, the case manager might feel a natural inclination to act defensively. Often you may find that it's the easiest way to remain emotionally calm and objective is by distancing yourself from challenging clients. This does a disservice to these clients. Such behaviors are against ethical case management practice standards. Because these kinds of situations that risk a maleficent response from you can easily occur, you must possess empathy to some degree. Empathic communication techniques can prove enormously valuable in disempowering feelings, thoughts, or behaviors triggered by the client situation. Regardless of how you actually feel at any given moment, your ability to respond in a supportive, non-judgmental, and compassionate manner to the challenging client, the challenging support system, can be invaluable. This is not hypocritical. A case manager, like any healthcare professional, should be exercising skills aimed at the client's empowerment and improvement. For example, if you express your true feelings towards your client or their support system, such as exasperation or even dislike of the client, and those feelings turn out to be maladaptive towards reaching a therapeutic goal, then such expression cannot have clinical value, no matter how authentically it reflects your feelings or your state of mind. Beneficence and Justice. In case management practice, you demonstrate just treatment through the ethical allocation of benefits to your clients and their support systems. The duty of benefits is to take active steps to promote and benefit the welfare of the client support system, and when appropriate, others. The duty of justice is to treat the client and the client support system fairly and without any malice, bias, or prejudice. Consider pondering the following questions daily. How do you determine what counts as a benefit for your client? What if you, your client, or a third-party payer disagrees on the value of a particular benefit? How much benefit do you owe your clients? And how do you evaluate the quality of a benefit when, in certain situations, not all benefits can be offered? And what if you're simply unable to affect the allocation of a particular desirable benefit? These questions contribute to ethical dilemmas and sometimes frustration. You should not become defensive when client support systems view your professional activities as focused more on cutting costs or limiting their care. The simple fact that case management is an instrument in reducing healthcare expenditures is, at face value, ethically laudable. Whatever can be ethically done to reduce healthcare expenses is a good thing indeed. Particularly challenging, especially in case management context, is the clash when a patient or a client appears to need a benefit, but his or her coverage management occurs in such a context, one of high ethical aspirations that aim at superior healthcare outcomes, but that also recognize that the reservoir of benefits is not bottomless. Who will reimburse it? Case management occurs in such a context, one of high ethical aspirations that aim at superior healthcare outcomes, but that also recognize that the reservoir of benefits is not bottomless. Veracity is the ethical principle that obligates you to tell the truth to your clients and their support systems, to professional colleagues and any other individual or entity you deal with while providing case management services. Truth-telling adds value to both you as a case manager and to your client's support systems. Three main benefits of veracity or truth-telling. 1, it promotes the case manager's accountability and professionalism. 2, it enhances the quality of relationships case managers develop or desire to develop with clients and client support systems. And 3, it facilitates the building of trust between case managers and their clients and the client support system. If you violate the ethical principle of veracity, you lose your credibility with and the respect of your clients and your professional colleagues. You adhere to veracity when you communicate honestly, when you share relevant, accurate, clear, and understandable information. You adhere to veracity when you conform to the facts, and when you remain objective. You adhere to veracity when you practice habitual truthfulness. Veracity is grounded in respecting the client's autonomy and right to self-determination. You may enhance veracity through fidelity, which requires loyalty, fairness, advocacy, integrity, and dedication to your client and your client support system. Developing trusting relationships with clients and their support systems, you have to demonstrate faithfulness, truthfulness, honesty, transparency, sincerity, and fidelity. Some clients and their support systems may verbalize their desire not to know the full truth or all the details of their condition or prognosis. Clients may also ask that their support systems not be informed of their diagnosis or prognosis. In these cases, case managers must respect the wishes of the clients or the client support system. Withholding information in these cases does not mean that the case manager has violated an ethical principle of veracity. Veracity is most applicable in two main aspects of client care: delivery and case management practice. Client care delivery is sharing information necessary for effective, informed decision-making and consent for care and services. Telling the truth about care, including errors and untoward events, is being truthful. Professional ethics is being honest in professional interactions and activities, including all relationships, documentation, billing, regulatory reporting, peer reviews, and risk management. You can prevent violating the ethical principle of veracity by avoiding the act of lying or the deliberate exchange of erroneous information, omissions or withholding part or all of the truth, and using medical jargon that misleads clients or their support systems and results in a lack of understanding of a situation. This ends the lesson on self-advocacy skill development with clients. Please take the test and remember a passing grade of 70% is expected. Thank you.